Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross from PTCGRadio, and today you are watching round 8 from the UK National Championships, featuring Josh PoetPearce playing a very interesting Virizion Genesect with Seismitoad against the lovely Jake Walvin, who is going to be playing Seismitoad Shaman. It's a very interesting game, but I must warn you before we start that this was part of a live broadcast that we sent out over the internet on the day of UK Nationals, so you might hear references to tweeting in your comments or to pauses which we've actually since cut out rather than leave them in the video. There's an interview with both the players at the end which I urge you to stick around for, and again the audio quality is going to change and the volume is going to change a tiny bit when we get to that. So it's not quite exactly the same as you might be expecting from the YouTube videos I've posted before, because we've literally just taken the live stream, cut it up, done a little bit of editing around, and chucked it up here. So I hope you enjoy it very much indeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the 8th and final round from UK National Championships 2015. So tell all your friends to come watch the final round, because I have got a doozy for you. Feel free to tweet or Facebook, tell everyone to come and get involved. And if you want to tweet me at TheWossy, TheWossy, you are running out of time to do so. So if you want to send me any lovely tweets, please feel free to get in touch. Now, here we have picked a very special game. We've got another Seismitoad, except it's one of the same Seismitoads. It's Jake Walvin from several rounds ago. And the reason, quite simply, is Jake Walvin is currently at 5 wins and 2 draws. He's doing very, very well indeed. And he is playing against Josh PoetPearce, who is also at 5 wins and 2 draws, and also doing very, very well indeed. He is going to be playing Virizion Genesect. Now, on my most recent podcast, PTCGRadio, I think it's week 146, I talked about the fact that, quite frankly, I wasn't giving a huge amount of love and respect to Virizion Genesect. Just wasn't happening because I didn't think it was that viable. One of the problems was that against a deck like Seismitoad, it's going to be too slow. They're going to be playing hammers and they're going to be playing headringer, and they're going to stop you ever using an Emerald Slash. Well, Josh basically took that almost as a little bit of a challenge. He's got a very, very unusual list, and I'm gonna show you as much as I can as we go through this game. Now, his friend Yasin Balala, I want to say, my apologies for your pronunciation, sir. He deserves the credit for actually making this deck. But it's a very interesting deck, and I want to show it to you, because he plays many things that you wouldn't expect to find in a traditional Virizion Genesect list. But that shouldn't terribly surprise you, because traditional Virizion Genesect lists aren't going to do well in these Roaring Skies On tournaments. It's just not happening. So you've had to go a little bit outside the box. One thing he plays, Seismitoad. Several Seismitoad. Because the thing about Virizion Genesect is, every matchup that was good before is still good now, with the exception of Seismitoad, which we'll get to. You're still going to destroy you're still going to destroy Groudon. You can use Red Signal to drag him active, and you can kill him very easily. You don't even need to use G-Booster. You can just use a muscle-banded Megalo Cannon. Now, the problem here is that against decks like, for instance, Seismitoad, they're going to stop you getting set up. They're going to stop you getting all your energy on the field. So you need a backup plan. And the backup plan essentially is Seismitoad. And what Seismitoad does is it basically stops people using Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer. It stops people using Headringer. It allows you to build up your energy. So you use Seismitoad against Seismitoad, you set up behind Seismitoad, and then you can just get going with your Emerald Slash, and you can Emerald Slash from one Virizion onto a second Virizion, and so on and so forth. It is, quite frankly, a very, very good idea indeed. It's a very, very good deck. But he also plays things like Crushing Hammer in there. I think there's Enhanced Hammer in there. I don't believe he plays Colress Machine, because he's not going for the super fast setup deck. He's going for the, I'm going to set up behind Seismitoad, and by the time you actually get going, then I'm going to have enough energy. Virizion nicely 2-hit KOs Seismitoad, and Seismitoad really doesn't do much against Virizion. They can't laser, they do very little damage because Virizion is, I believe, resistant to water if I remember correctly. I don't think Genesect is, but I think Virizion is. So you sit there while the Seismitoad does very, very little damage. Then you are immune to lasers, and unless they can hit like 3 Crushing Hammer in one turn, then there really is nothing you can do about it. It's just not going to go well. So the question is, it's brilliant in theory, but we've talked about this throughout the day today. Is it actually going to be good in practice? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. My apologies for the delay. Essentially, what happened was that we have a situation where there was a repairing and we didn't know what was going on with the repairing, so we had to wait. Now, these two chaps are IDing, but for the stream, they are going to play out as if they weren't IDing. So we've got 2 people who are both at UK Nationals. They have both gone 5-0-2, which I think we can all agree is a pretty gosh darn good achievement. And we've got a very, very unusual Virizion Genesect deck, the likes of which I've never seen. So yes, they've already ID'd. You just saw that on the stream. Let's not pretend that didn't happen. But what we are going to see here is a really good game from really good players with a very interesting deck, and they've both gone 5-0-2. It's going to be very interesting to see if they've actually ID'd themselves out of cup, because they're only going to be going with 18 points here, and 130 people, top 8, 6-2 or 5-0-3 is not guaranteed. So he's got the DC on the Seismitoad, he hasn't got it active, and this is a mistake I've talked about a few times today. Oh, we see the head ringer on the Seismitoad, that's key. And that really could be the thing that gives Jake a real early advantage here. The combination of the double colourless and, if he's able to get rid of the double colourless and then add the head ringer, means that it's going to be difficult for Josh to actually get going here. It's going to be difficult for him to get Quaking Punching, and of course, as I previously explained, he's playing a weird Virizion Genesect with Seismitoad. So what he needs to do is use the Seismitoad to Quaking Punch so that he can set up the Virizion to Emerald Slash, and then he's going to be going quite nicely. So, because a lot of people have joined since we kind of had our little break, we've got Josh PoetPearce on the left. He's playing Virizion Genesect with Seismitoad and Hammers, and we'll explain all about this deck as we go through. Jake, we've seen on the stream already today, he is playing Seismitoad, and it's just that rubbish Seismitoad Shaman deck. And as I mentioned before, those people who haven't had their nationals yet, be prepared for Seismitoad, because he is going to be everywhere, and it's gonna suck. Just be warned. So he gets a switch there, so he's got the Jirachi out of the active. The Jirachi's got a head ring on, but it's going to make very little difference. He's attacking Josh with the dice. Going for the heads there. He wanted to presumably get the Shaman, just draw a couple extra cards before the Juniper. It's a way of, you don't want to Juniper cards if you can use them. So you play the Super Scoop up, see if you can get the Shaman just to draw a couple of extra cards before you Juniper away. It's better than just, most of the time, it's better than just Junipering away the Super Scoop up. Although you do run the risk potentially of putting yourself in a situation where you draw into cards, you know, like if you'd have drawn into a double colourless then, and then Juniper the double colourless, that would have sucked. So here we've got the Seismitoad. Jake has got the laser, he's got the Quaking Punch, and he's got the, he goes for the SC, he's getting the Juniper back just because he hasn't got rid of that DC. He knows there's a chance he's going to be Trainer Lock next turn. Now that Josh is Trainer Lock, there's not even any point getting another Seismitoad out, because the problem is he's not going to be adding a Muscle Band on it. So, oh, that is not pretty. The good news is he's got a Chorus and 4 Juniper there, so I think someone's going to be Chorusing next turn rather than playing all 4 Juniper. Interesting side note, at the beginning of this tournament, Jake almost, when he actually wrote down Professor Sycamore, and, oh, it was somebody else, sorry, it wasn't Jake, but there was a player who wrote down Professor Sycamore and then had to cross it out at the last minute and put in Juniper so that they didn't lose all of their supporters. Now, the good news is here that if Josh can get the Genesect out of the active and get another energy on the Toad, then he can start quaking punching, and then Jake can't get rid of the energy, and that's going to be crucial. Here's the problem. He's trainer locked. He can't get out of the active. He can't retreat, and he's just attached a G booster under trainer lock, and Jake's caught that. There we go. I thought I was going to have to send someone out to them then. So here, he can't get the Genesect out of the active, and what that means is Jake has got a turn to try and get rid of that energy. Now, if he gets rid of one energy, well, actually, even if he gets rid of one energy, because the problem is, Josh needs to use his energy attachment for next turn to retreat the Genesect. Now, what would be really quite fun is if, and this would involve Jake missing all of his hammers. If Jake didn't get any hammers, then Josh would potentially be able to attach a plasma energy to the Genesect, activate Genesect's red signal ability to bring maybe a shaman into the active, and then start attacking that with the Seismitoad. That could be quite fun. Jake also here, he's going to need a muscle band because he's already pulled off the brilliant, I've got a head ringer on your Seismitoad. Now he needs a muscle band on his Seismitoad, so he's winning the Seismitoad on Seismitoad action. This is still not particularly grim for Josh yet. And there goes the enhanced hammer, and now it's starting to get quite grim. As long as Josh can keep a bit of energy on the board, as soon as he starts quaking punching, he's going to be able to get a Virizion out. And he's going to be able to attach a couple of energy to that Virizion, because while you're trainer locking your opponent, there's nothing your opponent can do in terms of getting rid of your energy. They can play a Genesect, but they can only use the only way to get rid of a basic energy is a Team Flare Grunt. And he's going to be attaching basic energy to Virizion, and Team Flare Grunt can only get rid of energy on the active Pokemon. So attaching basic grass to Virizion will make it completely safe. Now, what Josh is kind of hoping for here is... Now, here's a weird thing for Jake. If Jake doesn't hit heads on Crushing Hammer, there's an argument here not to attach the muscle band. If he attaches the muscle band, that Genesect will die. If he doesn't attach the muscle band, that Genesect will die going into Jake's turn, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, the good news is... And I don't know why, if it's poisoned, it should be dead by now. It looks like they're not adding on the poison damage there. Because if that Genesect is poisoned and it's taking Quaking Punch damage, then it should be dying a little bit faster than this. And he's playing the Crushing Hammer there. I'm going to go and see what's going on. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Turns out it has all been worked out quite correctly. They're playing at quite a fast pace. So, that Genesect is living for now. It ain't going to be living for very much longer. Jake has got 2 Seismitoads out now with the energy, and he's hit the Crushing Hammer on the Toad. Now, that's not the end of the world. Because what he can potentially do here... I was going to say, what he needs, and he's used the Trainer's Mail to get it... What he needs to do here is try and hit a Crushing Hammer to get rid of that extra energy on the Toad. Because Josh has no free retreaters on his bench. What that means is that he's going to have to put something active. And that's something he's going to have to attack. Now, Josh is going to need a double colourless energy here. And if he gets a double colourless energy, so Jake goes 2 prizes up. If Josh gets a double colourless energy here, then potentially he's going to be okay. But it's going to take... I mean, that's what it's going to take. The other option is to... The problem is that Shaman's just going to die. I don't... And we see an N coming out here. I would like to have seen Josh put the Seismitoad active because he hasn't really got any other choices at this stage. There's nothing really for him to do here because the Seismitoad's just going to die. He can't retreat anything without attaching energy, and he needs to use his energy for the Seismitoad to get rolling. So he's just going down more and more prizes here. Now he didn't hit the double colourless energy, so maybe it's been vindicated there, but Jake seems in total control of this game. Essentially, early game, this turns into essentially a Seismitoad mirror match. And in a Seismitoad mirror match, the win essentially goes to whoever gets the best start. Especially if one player is able to Quaking Punch and stop his opponent from Quaking Punching. These things are almost kind of decided. It's not... You wonder what else Josh can actually do. Now, even if he gets that Seismitoad active and starts attacking, Jake's going to be down to 2 prizes by that point. You wonder what he's really going to be able to do to try and get back into it. Now, one option is scooping nice and early and just taking it to game 2 and 3. But then, of course, you're kind of giving up before you've even started. So that might not be the best plan for him here. But I don't really see how he's going to get out of this. That is a decent plan, but I don't think that's going to win him the game. Essentially, he's just using Shaman's attack to do 30 damage, and then Shaman and the DCE go back into his hand. Which is all well and good, and there's a Lysandra on the Genesect, which ruins that plan entirely. The problem is he was always going to be attaching to the Shaman every turn, which means there was never going to be a turn where he would be able to actually get the energy on the Seismitoad. Now, what he could benefit from here is some kind of Lysandra play not dissimilar to what Jake's just tried. Just to buy himself a turn without trainer lock, or indeed to do what he's doing here. Now, it's far from ideal, but what he can do here is just hope Jake doesn't get rid of any of his energy. And if he doesn't, he can try retreat in the Genesect. And like we saw previously, what he could potentially do is attach a Plasma Energy to the Genesect, activate Genesect's red signal ability to bring something active from the bench, and then retreat into the Seismitoad. So instead of hitting into the Toad, he's hitting into a Shaman or something like that. Something which is going to be a bit weaker, go down a bit faster. And remember, under trainer lock, the only way Jake can get any of these things out of the active is by attaching and then discarding energy. And in a deck where you're only playing 4 DCE, that is not something you want to be doing terribly often. We see another muscle band down there, and Josh knows that this is bad news. The good news is that he's yet to hit a hammer or get rid of any energy. And speak of the devil, we have a crushing hammer, and it is a heads. Oh. Josh is playing brilliantly here, and he's fighting valiantly. But you wonder what he can actually do to get out of this. It's a fantastic deck, but he really has been... This game is not being kind to him. It's not going in his way, which is a little bit upsetting, but I don't really know what else he could have done. I mean, there was that turn where he could have promoted the Seismitoad as a bit of a Hail Mary play, but he didn't hit the DCE off of the end, so it was a kind of a pointless exercise anyway. So here he gets an energy on the Virizion, and we see an N. It seems like he's trying to just go for it. Just go for the Emerald Slash and hope. Now, there is a Headringer on that Virizion on the bench. So that Virizion is going to need free energy to Emerald Slash. and he can use DCE to do so. He can have a Grass Energy and a DCE, but we've seen he's lost a fair few DCE. So it's still going to take 2 turns here. Josh is going to need another Grass Energy attached to that Virizion on the bench, and then he's going to need another attachment to get that Genesect out of the active. And there's a Crushing Hammer on the Virizion. And what's happening in this game is essentially everything which I suggested would happen to your standard Virizion Genesect list. You can't get the energy out, you can't keep the energy out, and your opponent is just going to run through you, because the decks are so fast now. These Seismitoad decks are just redonkulous. Now, obviously, Josh has got his Seismitoad, and that can help to even out the game. But the problem is, we don't see that working at the moment. He's not got the Seismitoad out. He's not getting the Seismitoad working. So this isn't actually going as well as it could. I think that's an understatement. Now, I think at this stage, and we see the laser coming down, and it's ahead. That Genesect ain't lasting much longer. I'm almost tempted to, and it looks like actually if he does 80 damage, yeah, he will get the KO here. Go down to 2 prizes. If he's got a DCE, he can start. And he's got a DCE, so he can finally get a Quaking Punch. But the problem is, he's Quaking Punching for 30 damage, and Jake's Quaking Punching for 50 damage. So, essentially here, Josh needs to try and buy himself enough time to manually attach Grass Energy to the Virizion, and then he might have a chance. Because Seismitoad's only doing 30 damage to Virizion. Virizion ain't getting hurt by lasers. That's a 6-hit KO. You use 1 Virizion to build up a second Virizion on the bench, and then you essentially just go. And you just keep flicking between the Virizions, and hoping that your opponent doesn't pull any kind of ridiculous shenanigans with Lysandra. One of the problems, of course, is that Seismitoad, if I remember correctly, has a retreat cost of 3. Which means as soon as Josh actually gets this going, it's just going to take 1 Lysandra from Jake to completely ruin his plan. Which is not good. So, here, and obviously you see there, the reason the Seismitoad's not got that much damage on is because you've got the Jinx there out for Jake. So it is healing 10 damage a turn. So not only does Josh not have the muscle band on, but we've actually got the Jinx there, which gets rid of the muscle, which gets rid of 10 damage. So he's doing 20 damage per turn. So it's not a 6-hit KO, it's a 9-hit KO. And this is what Jake was talking about when he came in to have a bit of a chat with us after his game earlier. It's really quite... It's a good little tech for the mirror. And this is what a lot of people have been telling us today with Seismitoad. Tech for the mirror, tech for the mirror. Oh, do you go Jinx to heal a bit of damage? Do you go extra Xerasic and Team Flag Grunt to get rid of their DCE? Do you go for, like we saw Ollie play earlier, with the 1-1 Slurpuff, so you can draw, you have a card advantage over your opponent? There's a lot of different things to try. Now, that Toad is going to die this turn, so he's going to have to retreat it. So he pays the retreat cost of 3, and he retreats into the Virizion, and he's able to do 100 damage. Doesn't quite get the KO, but it does mean he can start attaching to the Virizion on the bench. And this is, it's basically put up or shut up time. Now the problem is, he's so far behind that 1 Lysandra from Jake, and he's back with the Crushing Hammers. 1 Lysandra from Jake is going to be all it takes to actually end this game. Because that Seismitoad on the bench has 30 HP left. And we see a heads on the flip. No, it must have been a tails on the flip. No, it was a heads on the flip. I was correct. They need to pay more attention to this game. And he's done exactly what all the Seismitoad players, the good players, are doing. You pick up 1 Seismitoad, promote another, attach a DCE and Muscle Band, and you're just going. He's got 2 Toads that he's streaming with DCE and Muscle Band. Now, were he less far behind in this game, Josh would be in a pretty good position now. It doesn't matter if the old Grass Energy gets knocked off with a double colourless. We can live with that. I say we, I'm not playing. Josh can live with that, because he can just use Emerald Slash to get all that energy back. And he's 2-hit KOing those Seismitoad quite easily, even with the Jinx, because 100 damage from Emerald Slash goes down to 90, and then the next turn he's on 190 and he's dead. So it's a very winnable game in that respect, but the problem is it's so late in the game here that we just need a Lysandra from Jake, and he's got the win. And oh my, you see, this is what I'm talking about with these and there we go. He uses a Trainer's Mail, he gets a VS Seeker, he uses a VS Seeker to grab a Lysandra from the discard pile, uses a Lysandra to drag the Virizion, the half-dead Seismitoad active, and just like that, we have a win for Jake. It is, quite frankly, what these Seismitoad decks do, and they're going to ruin this format up to and including Worlds. Just so we're completely clear on this, it's going to ruin the format up to and including Worlds. It's not going to be any fun for any of us. Your Nationals, if you haven't played it already, is going to be full of Toad. And Worlds is going to be full of Toad. So the question remains, I suppose, is there a really viable anti-Toad deck? Now, we've seen obviously the new stuff, which is from the new Bandit Ring set, which is going to be the Hoopla base set. That's going to give good support to Grass, and that might even kill Toad in August, after Worlds. First, we need to worry about this year's World. So there really is a legitimate question as to, is there anything out there which is a really good Toad counter? Now, we know Groudon can beat it, but people are taking in things like Mewtwo to take on the Groudon. I've certainly heard of Seismitoad beating Groudon today, and the top tables are full of Seismitoad. They aren't full of Groudon. Similarly, Josh's Virizion Genesect deck here, he's beaten Toads already today. It can beat Seismitoad. But we've just seen in this previous game, it's far from a guarantee. That was weird. It's not something that's going to happen kind of every single game on a game-by-game basis. So, yeah, it's possible, but it's not really the kind of thing which is going to happen every time. And if you're going to be playing an anti-Toad deck that beats Toad maybe 50% of the time, it's going to be a worry here. Now, I must point out that Josh is currently undefeated. He's 5-0-2. Or 5-0-3 now, actually, if you count this intentional draw. So, he's clearly playing the deck very, very well, and he clearly knows what he's doing, and it's clearly a deck which has very good matchups across the board. But you saw there, it's far too often and far too easy for Toad decks to just take over. They can get rid of your energy, they can heal the damage you've done, they can put headringers on so you need more energy, and they can just completely stop you playing in a manner which is, I mean, close to unfair. The other question we need to address, of course, is where has Jake gone? Nobody cares, he's back. So, let's quickly update this to show that Jake did win Game 1. Let's give him his props. And we move into Game 2. And although they have ID'd, they're playing this game out. Always a good plan to play out games if you ID, just to get a bit of extra practice with your deck. Now, arguably, these two people could end up playing each other in cut, although they doubt not the first round, but later on in cut. Maybe they don't want to give away all their secrets, but a long tournament like this, sometimes a couple extra games can, you know, really get your head around your deck and really be quite good. Now, Josh has started Virizion, so again, he hasn't started Seismitoad, which is very bad for Josh. But remember, he's going to have a turn with trainers. So, all he needs to do is use that turn with trainers to get that Virizion out of the active and get a Seismitoad out. And going second can be quite useful here because Arno's going to be going first, isn't he? There isn't even... If he benches a Seismitoad, he really wants to get an item, a tool on it, because he doesn't want a repeat of the last game where he benches a Seismitoad and then straight away we see a Headringer come down and there's nothing he can do. That would be an upsetting situation for him. It's not what he wants to happen. The good news is he's going first, and he's got 2 extra cards from the mulligans, and then he gets to go first again. Unless he's chosen to go second, which is a possibility. No, he is going first. So, we see the head ringer go down there on the Shaman, and a G-booster going down on the Virizion. Virizion doesn't need G-booster, but Virizion really doesn't want a head ringer. So, yeah, G-booster on Virizion's a bit rubbish, but you're not going to need a G-booster. If Josh is going to win this game, he's going to win it without G-booster. And this way, Jake, and I believe I was speaking to Jake earlier, I don't think Jake plays Megaphone. And that means that he is not getting a head ringer on that Virizion, which is good. Now, it's all going to come down to, can Jake get a Crushing Hammer heads? If he gets a heads on Crushing Hammer, things are going to change pretty quickly here. If he doesn't get a heads on Crushing Hammer, all Josh needs to do is bench a Virizion, and this is going to be a very, very different game to the one we've just witnessed. He can use Emerald Slash from one Virizion to another, he can get set up, and it's going to go quite nicely. But Jake, first of all, uses the Ultra Ball, he gets out a Seismitoad, and he gets a Super Scoop Up for the Shaman. It's a big flip, and he hits a Tails. But he's got another one, so it's a... Oh, no, he's got a Switch, sorry. The reason he wanted a Super Scoop Up there is because if you get the Super Scoop Up, not only do you get the Shaman out of the active, but you get to play the Shaman and draw some more cards. Now, he has hit a Crushing Hammer there. So, this is an even bigger flip than the previous one, and it's a Tails. Things are not going very well for Jake this game. He is now 0 for 2. He plays an Acrobike, and the question is, what's he get? I didn't see what he got there. It's a Super Scoop Up, which he can use again to try and get that Seismitoad, to get the Shaman up and draw some more cards. And it's 0 for 3 on this turn. Hallelujah. Josh is a happy man. And he should be. He's having a little bit of luck this game. Oh, and has he passed? Oh, this is huge. He's got no energy. And we see the Ultra Ball coming down there for the Virizion. This is lovely. You are going to get to see Josh's deck do what Josh's deck does. Although you're kind of not. Because the whole point of Josh's deck... Oh, and he's gone for the Shaman. Presumably he's confident of his ability to get a Virizion. And we see a Plasma Frigate down there. It basically gets rid of weakness for any Pokemon that have Plasma Energy attached. I spoke to Josh, and he has drawn into the Virizion, so everything worked out nicely. I spoke to Josh before this game, and what he said was, well, I needed a Stadium to counter Silent Lab. Silent Lab is too devastating to my basic Pokemon that have abilities, i.e. all of them but Seismitoad. So he's playing the Plasma Frigate there just as a card to basically counter any Stadium that might come out. There's a Super Scoop Up, and it's a Tails, which is a little bit sad. Here's another one. Nobody... Oh, no, he's actually hit a Heads. That's good. And then he's been able to get 3 cards from that. 4 cards from that. Now, here he's really in the driving seat, because Virizion only has a retreat cost of 1. So he is able to... He's going to be able to Emerald Slash onto the Virizion, and then even if Jake hits a heads on Crushing Hammer on the active, he can then free retreat the Virizion, and then just Emerald Slash from the second Virizion back onto the first one. And this is how Virizion works. You don't need Genesect. Genesect is a complete and utter waste of your time. Now, you play Genesect for matchups, firstly so you can use Red Signal, and for matchups like Groudon, etc., etc., but you don't use Genesect against Seismitoad. Yeah, the one-hit KO is fun, but you don't want the one-hit KO. What you want is to be able to continue to play the game turn after turn. There's no point getting a one-hit KO on one Seismitoad, only for your opponent to hit a bunch of hammers and run you out of energy and then just take a slow, laborious win. So he's put the DCE on the bench Seismitoad because he wants to essentially save the actives. Oh, that is not good! So 0 for 5? 0 for 6? 0 for 7? Ah, and then Super Scoop Up Cyclone. I don't think he's hit a head yet. No, he hasn't a head yet. Something like 7 flips, or around about that. It's a lot of flips. And this, of course, brings us one of the big downsides of this Seismitoad deck. So many flips. It's really quite depressing. So he's got the Crushing Hammer here, and what he's really going to want to do is try and hit a Crushing Hammer on the benched Virizion and combine that with a head ringer. It heads! Now he's got the active. If he hits a head ringer on the bench, okay. So I might have gone for the one on the bench there if I had a head ringer, but he didn't. What he's forcing Josh to do here... Oh no. Josh had an energy in hand that worked out quite nicely. The worst case scenario there was he was forcing Josh to discard another energy. Oh, and quite nicely here, Virizion has no weakness because she's got a plasma energy attached. It's completely pointless. Jake's playing no fire Pokemon, but let's just appreciate the fact that a plasma frigate is out and a plasma energy is attached. So again, it comes down to, can Jake hit the flips? Can he save them? There comes the Enhanced Hammer. And this is why, although Josh can with a... Oh, he's got nothing. Probably because he's whiffed all his Super Scoop-Ups. Although Josh with a Head Ringer can do a... He can do an Emerald Slash of a Grass and a Double Colours. He really doesn't want to. And it looks like we're going to Game 3 here. Jake has basically realised that I'm not winning this game. And he's not winning this game. For the entire rest of that game, unless Jake hits super good on Crushing Hammers, the only possible situation Jake wins there is with Crushing Hammers. Because what was just going to happen throughout the rest of that game was Josh was going to sit there and he was just going to keep Emerald Slashing. He was going to hit a trump card at some point to get the energy back in the deck. And Jake could have gone crazy. It's not outside the realms of possibility that he hits 4 Crushing Hammers in one turn. It's happened. Especially with these Seismitoad decks that can draw through. But it's incredibly improbable. You've only got a 1 in 16 chance of hitting all 4. And that's bearing in mind that you'd have to draw all 4. He wants to save time. We're about half an hour in, so there is, I believe, half an hour in. So there's still 20 minutes left. There is a chance for Jake to pull out a victory here. And he gets to go first, if he wishes to go first. And he started Jinx, so he's probably going to want to go first. So, like I say, although Josh could potentially, he could Emerald Slash with the Grass Double Colourless if there's a Head Ringer on, it's so easy for a deck like Seismitoad to get rid of Special Energy that it really isn't something you want to do as anything other than a last resort. So, Shaman's coming down now. And he's going to be able to draw some more cards. He's going to want to try and get him out the active and try and get some stuff down. Now, the game essentially is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to go Jake's way like in Game 1 or Josh's way like in Game 2. However, Jake's actually hitting some flips here, which helps. But he's already got the Head Ringer on the Seismitoad, and that's going to really help him. He's got the DCE on the Seismitoad. And again, that's not a move which I'm a huge fan of, but maybe he's got another one in hand. Maybe he's got one in hand and he's going to Juniper next turn. Maybe he really wanted those extra cards from Shaman. So you can see why he's done it. But, oh, and there's an AZ. And it felt like he played his supporter, but he hadn't actually played his supporter, which is terribly depressing. Now, Josh needs to make the most of his one turn here. There comes the Crushing Hammer right over to Jake, and we have no idea what's happening with that. And he gets ahead. There goes the DCE, and that's why I wouldn't have attached the DCE. Now Jake needs a DCE, but he's only got 3 left in his deck, and that's assuming that he's going to be able to, you know, draw into one of them, and that none of them are prized. But Josh needs to get that Seismitoad out of the active. It's no good just leaving it there with a double colourless in the active and a head ringer attached, because Jake's going to get rid of that double colourless energy. And when Jake gets rid of that double colourless energy, you ain't going to be using Quaking Punch next turn. Now, there's a depressing situation. He ended up with a Seismitoad and a Switch in hand, so what he could have ended up doing, had he waited on the DCE for a minute or two, he may well have been able to put the DCE down on another Seismitoad and switched into it, because he's not train locked yet. But he gave up that opportunity, and it seems like a slightly missed opportunity. But here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Get ready for some boring, boring play, because we've got a head ringer on both Seismitoads, which means nobody's Quaking Punching anytime soon. Or, essentially, it's who can draw into a Switch first, which was Josh, but he just discarded it with an Ultra Ball. Josh ain't Quaking Punching this turn, and Jake is going to need a Switch or a Scoop Up and a DCE to Quaking Punch next turn. What would be amazing here is if Josh hit another head ringer. Oh, he hasn't done it. That's a little bit upsetting. So Plasma Frigate lasts no time at all. Here comes a Crushing Hammer. It's a heads. Bye-bye the energy. And it's a Super Scoop Up. And it's another heads. Jake's fortunes have completely turned around from the previous game. And now it's looking pretty rosy for Jake. If he can hit a DCE. No DCE. No Quaking Punch. Although there is a head ringer on the Virizion, which is pretty good. And there goes a DCE from the Acro Bike. So he's going to be able to start Quaking Punching. And this is just going to get a little bit depressing. Because, well, not for us, but for Josh, it's going to go very much like it went in Game 1. Josh now needs to get attacking. He's not going to get attacking. That's the big problem here. Because he's not going to be able to get attacking, Jake is going to be able to take all of his energy off. And he's left in that annoying position where he needs to attach energy to retreat his Pokemon to get the Seismitoad out, while he's attaching energy to the Seismitoad. And if you're not Ollie Barnett, you can't attach two energies in one turn. Sorry, Ollie. You know I quite like you, really. And that's the biggest problem here. Even when that Seismitoad goes down, he needs to put something else active. And what does he put active? Now, he does get a Virizion down. He gets an energy on the Virizion. He plays an N. Hopefully, for Josh, Jake is not going to hit a Crushing Hammer this turn. But even if he doesn't hit a Crushing Hammer this turn, that Virizion isn't getting into the active under Trainer Lock. And that's a problem. So, the big question here is, essentially, and this is going to come down to a lot of Seismitoad matchups, and if it doesn't sound ideal, ladies and gentlemen, then I'm sorry, but this is the way your Nationals is going to go too. It's just going to come down to whether Jake can hit heads on a Crushing Hammer. If Josh can have a couple turns with Jake not hitting heads on Crushing Hammer, then he's going to be able to get back into this. He's going to get some energy out, and we're going to see like what happened in Game 2. Even though Jake has got Super Scoop Ups, the constant pressure from Virizion's Emerald Slashing is just too much. And it's not going to work out nicely. So we see a laser there and it comes up Tails, but that Seismitoad's now going to die just a little bit faster. And we see a Super Scoop Up coming out, and it is a Tails. So he's on a little bit of a Tails run there. But he's got a Scoop Up Cyclone, so it's really not the end of the world. He's going to pop a Muscle Band down just to get it out of his hand to draw one more card with Shaman, and then he's going to drop the Shaman to draw a few cards. He needs to basically set himself up to stop Josh playing. And ideally, he wants a Crushing Hammer. Now, he's got one in his hand. He's going to play it, and it's going to be a heads. And so it continues. And we see a Trainer's Mail. Again, this card which shall we say, didn't have as much faith in as a lot of people. And it seems that I've been proven roundly wrong. Because everyone else seems to be liking it a lot more than me. They seem to be playing it. It seems to be coming out quite nicely. And it just gives that extra little consistency to try and get those trainer cards out. So, Josh here, he gets another energy on his Virizion. And now the Seismitoad's going to go down. So this is really the turn. If Josh can keep that energy on the Virizion this turn, and that Seismitoad dies, which it will, he can then put the Virizion into the active, and it's all just a moot point, because as I'm trying to lay out all of these ways that Josh could potentially try and make an heroic comeback, Virizion dies. Now, he is desperate for... he doesn't have the DCE. He has managed to Xerosic away the DCE from Toad, and he's just got another one back again. So there goes Josh's hope of having one turn of attacking. And I think one of the problems Josh has got in this game is that Jake's list is really, really good and really, really consistent. It looks like, oh, every turn Jake needs this and he draws it. Well, yeah, that's how his deck's built. And I hate to break it to you, this is probably going to keep happening. And that's... I mean, Josh should be a little bit worried here. Because he's only 2 prizes down, but I struggle to see how he's actually going to get back in the game in any meaningful way. He hasn't got the DCE for the Seismitoad, and the Seismitoad's now poisoned. He doesn't have any grass energy down. Now the good news is it's all back in his deck, but he doesn't have any in his hand. And Jake is very much like he did, I think way back in round 1 we had Jake on. So we got a nice bit of symmetry here finishing off with Jake. His deck is doing what it does. And there comes a head ringer on the Seismitoad. And essentially, Josh's entire thought process now is, I hope he can't take his next 4 prizes before time's called. But he probably can, because Josh is trainer locked and Jake isn't. Jake's got laser. Jake's got super scoop up. Jake's got crushing hammers. Even if time gets called, oh, it looks like time has been called. No, they're just giving a slip in. I think they might still be carrying on for a moment. I think we're still about 10 minutes away from the end of the game. Yes, we are. They were just collecting in the slip. Because as I said, these chaps have already ID'd, but they're playing out the game for us because, you know, we chose them because they're an interesting matchup. And that's one of the advantages I think we've really had on this stream today. We have basically been given carte blanche by the organisers to stream whatever game we feel like. So it means that we've been able to actually pick games of interesting decks and good players. It's going to get less and less choosy tomorrow, of course, and we're going to end up with a whole heap of Seismitoad. But we will be back tomorrow, and we'll be doing one round from each game. So, excuse me, one game from each round. So there'll be plenty more Pokemon-y goodness going on tomorrow. Now, Josh here, he just needs to get something. It doesn't really matter what he gets going. He just needs something going. Either a Seismitoad or a Virizion. But he's back in the exact same situation he was in Game 1. That Seismitoad's going to go down in a minute. And by in a minute, I mean now. Jake's down to 2 prizes. And what's going to happen? And it looks like, yeah, Josh has realised there's still a good 8 minutes left. Even after that, Jake's going to have 2 turns worth of time. He's not going to get the win. He scoops. And Jake kind of wins if you ignore the fact that they ID'd at the beginning of the game. Now, we've still got a few hundred people listening, watching this, so do stay around just for a couple more minutes. The stream is going to be ending quite soon, but just before it does end, we're going to have a chat with Jake and with Josh. They're going to come and join us on the sofa, and that's not me trying to sound kind of all showbiz. We've literally got a sofa. We just unfortunately don't have a camera pointing at the sofa, so you're going to have to take our word for it. We'll be back very shortly. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so before we finish the stream for today, we're just going to have a quick chat with Jake and with Josh, who they chose to ID that final round, but they played it out for us. So first of all, thank you very much, chaps.
Right.
How are you going to feel if you've ID'd yourself out of cut?
Yeah. Not great, but you know what? We agreed to it. I looked at the numbers. We should be alright.
And I have absolute faith in you because you should be, in terms of resistance, two of the very top people.
I think so.
So, Jake, we talked about your deck earlier, so let's just flick straight to you, Josh. You are playing Virizion Genesect, but a very, very unusual Genesect list. Why?
I'm playing some really weird cards. I'm playing 3 Genesect, 3 Virizion, 3 Seismitoad, and 2 Shaman.
I'm getting this whole list right now.
Yeah, you can get my list. I don't care. If we play each other in top, we play each other in top. Like, you might not even make top, I might, so it's a possibility. But yeah, Yasin gave me this list. It's a senior who I'm in with, and he highly suggested to play this list. I wasn't sure. I was really doubting it. I came into the event, and I went win, draw, win. I was okay, this deck's really, really good. So the idea of the deck is you have lots of different routes against all the other good meta decks. So we play lots of energy, and the 3 DC and 3 plasma energy are like really key. Like the 3 DC is like surprisingly good when your Virizion is headringed, and also we have an edge against the Toad matchup and against the other Virizion matchup because we play the hammers and the headringers and that.
It sounds fantastic. I mean, watching it there was a beauty to behold. It was a shame that we didn't get to see it very much, especially in games 1 and 2, because Jake came along and basically ruined everything.
Yay!
With the deck the way you do. We saw you in round 1 being not very nice to Joe, who, it should be pointed out, won the next 3 games, though he couldn't take a prize against you, and had a very respectable day in the end. And then you've just come along and kind of ruined the final game of cut as well. In all seriousness, is this Shaman deck as strong as you were hoping it was going to be?
The Toad Shaman, yeah, exactly. I mean, in fact, I tied twice. Managed to tie against Trevenant Shaman, and I'm quite proud of that. But tied against my friend playing Toad Crawdaunt, and Toad Crawdaunt is a really swingy matchup. If they get a lot of Crawdaunts down and just remove your energy, you can't keep up. But we tied because we just didn't finish game 3. It's the same with Trevenant, so I thought, why not just ID, see if we make it in.
It sounds like a decent plan. Of course, having won the game now, then, you know, regrets.
Well, no, because we had already agreed to the ID, so our games probably would have been played differently. We would have thought differently about them had we actually had something on the line.
Absolutely. And that's something that must, of course, be pointed out. You know, you already had ID, so the games could have gone in a different way.
I'm pretty sure I would have actually lost because I'd have been nervous. Whereas this way around, I was like, whatever,
What,
doesn't
against
matter.
me?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I'm nervous
I
because
haven't slept for like 37 hours.
Say if I had to win, I'd have been nervous because I had to win.
Okay, that makes sense. I think Shaman's an incredibly powerful card, and I wish I was playing 4 today.
Yeah, Shaman is just crazy good. It's going to be taking over the format, kind of like Seismitoad is. Alright, gents, well, thank you very much for that. And it's been a pleasure having you on the stream.
Thank you, Ross.